Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's JPR, and welcome back to the Reviewing Every Pokemon Generation series. Today, we're moving on to Generation 6, which is comprised of Pokemon X, Y, Omega Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire. Generation 6 officially started in late 2013 and ushered in a new 3D era of Pokemon games, leaving behind the sprite-based format that it had not strayed from for the last 15 years. But visuals weren't the only thing this generation went hard on. It also introduced a number of new mechanics and features to the series, including but not limited to Sky Battles, Horde Battles, Pokemon Ami, Super Training, the player search system, fairy types, trainer customization, and last but not least, Mega Evolution, but we'll come back to that one later. One immediate praise that I must give to this generation is that many of these features helped in making competitive battling more accessible. Before this point, concepts like EVs and IVs were pretty difficult to grasp for many people due to the fact that they were invisible, but Super Training not only helped visualize EVs, it also dramatically helped speed up the EV training process. Or if you wanted to go a step further, Horde Hunting could also be used to fully EV train a Pokemon in as little as 10 minutes, a huge step up from previous generations. But even if you weren't interested in competitive battling at the time, there were plenty of cool shiny hunting methods that were also introduced, such as Chain Fishing, Friend Safari, the return of the Pokeradar from Sinnoh, DexNav and ORAS, and again, Horde Hunting was a popular method. The player search system and all the wonderful new features that came with it, such as Wonder Trade and a mobile global trade station, was a huge step up for multiplayer communication. It wasn't flawless by any means, but still leagues better than anything else we've ever gotten. Unfortunately, for every new addition you'll find in Kalos, you'll probably also find something missing. Kalos is the first region since Kanto to not feature any kind of minigames such as Pokeathlon, contests, or Pokestar Studios. Seasons from Generation 5 are scrapped, the music no longer changes depending on the battle situation, trainers don't speak in battles anymore, and there are almost no trainers to rematch in the game. Although Generation 5 also didn't have a rematch device such as the Versus Seeker or the Pokenav, those games gave you a considerable amount of trainers to rematch in the post-game, such as Colress, the Shadow Triad, Alder, and everyone in the Pokemon World Tournament. Kalos gives you Serena, and the gym leaders who don't even use their full teams against you in the Battle Chateau. Nice. Kalos also has some pretty major problems, such as a lack of content after the main story, and the games happen to be mindlessly easy. No, it has nothing to do with the EXP share, and the issue is big enough for me to make an entirely different video about it, so if you want more elaboration on that point, watch that video later. On the bright side, this is also the generation that set the standard for Pokemon having worldwide releases on the same day. Masuda claims that this was inspired by the titles of Pokemon X and Pokemon Y, representing how on October 12, 2013, the X and Y axes of all the people around the world would intersect and be able to play these games together at the same time. And then the entire game got leaked a week in advance. But hey, it's worth mentioning because it was a pretty nice step forward, even if it was becoming the norm for most other game series at the time. Anyway, now that the general stuff is out of the way, let's get into the meat of X and Y. Although I respect these games for attempting to add as much new content as they possibly could, it's undeniable that it came at the price of pretty much everything else being lackluster. These games introduced the fewest new Pokemon of any generation, the fewest new moves, and the fewest new abilities. I get it, they had to make 3D models for all 721 Pokemon plus heaps of alternate forms, but man, if I gotta be honest, these models are pretty underwhelming. They're incredibly lifeless compared to the old sprites we used to have, and most of them look pretty washed out on the 3DS. The only compliment I can give them is at least they've aged relatively well. It tries to make up for the shortcoming with a massive regional dex of 450 Pokemon, the largest regional dex we've seen yet, but I don't know, at the end of the day, I'm one of the Pokemon fans that really values a lot of new content, so it may be my personal bias speaking, but I find X and Y really underwhelming from this perspective, even with the addition of Mega Evolutions, which gave 30 new forms to popular pre-existing Pokemon. They're a cool concept that undeniably raised the hype levels through the roof. I mean, who doesn't like seeing their favorite Pokemon reimagined in new, cool, and creative ways? The main issue with these things is that they're the focus for most of the main story, yet all but 6 of them are locked to the post-game. Talk about a huge bummer. On top of that, there are only 3 NPCs in all of the main story who actually use Mega Evolution against you in battle, and one of them is a freaking tutorial battle with Mega Lucario, so realistically, only 2. Speaking of the main story, it's a mess in more ways than one. First off, I like to say that this is easily one of the worst paced Pokemon games, if not the worst. Getting the first 2 badges takes up nearly half the region alone, and from there on, the rest of the game feels like a speed run in the gyms. It's incredibly jarring. On top of that, this group of gym leaders is a major step down from the past few generations. Almost none of the leaders are involved in the main plot. And heck, aside from the Battle Chateau, most of them are never even seen outside their gyms. And then of course there's Team Flair, arguably one of the weakest written groups of villains yet. Not only do these guys take their dorkiness to the next level, but almost none of their plans are original. They're first encountered stealing fossils for money in Glittering Cave, like Team Rocket was in Mount Moon. Okay, probably a coincidence. Then they're stealing energy from a power plant. Kinda pushing it. And then they end up attempting to steal the Master Ball and use some radio waves to control wild Pokemon. Yeah, these guys are basically Team Rocket at this point. There's already way too much Kanto fan service in these games as it is, with Sandalwood Forest being a picture-perfect recreation of Viridian Forest, Kanto starters being given to you at the beginning of the game, and a Snorlax/Pokeflute side quest just lazily thrown to the main story. So I feel like Team Flair does nothing but add to the lack of originality this region already has issues with. And the cherry on top has to be one of the worst plot twists of all time, where the guy with a stylish suit, aggressive attitude, and flaming red hair reveals himself to be the leader of Team Flair all along. Wow, I am shocked! And if you assume that Mega Evolution was going to be the focal point of this story like a regular person would, then guess again, Buster, it's the ultimate weapon. You know, that thing that was mentioned like twice in the entire main story? Speaking of lack of mentions, the legendary mascots Xerneas and Yveltal are about as uninvolved in the story as any legendaries have been since Generation 2. Professor Sycamore makes that's right, one passing mention of Xerneas or Yveltal in Dendemil Town before they just show up in the Team Flair HQ later on. The excuse for this lack of acknowledgement is that they both disappeared 3,000 years ago, so there haven't been any stories recorded about them. Maybe this excuse would have worked in previous generations, but we already knew about Groudon and Kyogre, who haven't been seen since ancient times. And there are plenty of legends about Dialga and Palkia, who presumably haven't been seen since the dawn of the universe, so for Xerneas and Yveltal, it just comes off as yet another case of lazy writing. It honestly makes me ask why Xerneas and Yveltal are even considered legendary Pokemon if there are no legends about them. Above all else, it saddens me that the actual Norse deities that these Pokemon are based on have an incredibly rich lore, but in the games, there's next to nothing explaining their significance. Same goes for Zygarde, who again is another issue that I've made a separate video on. It's almost like issues being so big that they warrant their own separate video is a bad thing. He just feels like an afterthought, and the lack of a Pokemon Z doesn't just hurt him, it hurts Kalos as a whole. You'd think that since this generation only has 3 legendary Pokemon, the fewest of any generation, that they'd all be adequately fleshed out, but sadly, it's the polar opposite. The lack of clarity is great for all the Pokemon Theory YouTubers, but for the rest of us, not so much. Even the 3 mythical Pokemon they release in these games are about as disappointing as can be. These mystery gift events are nothing compared to Gens 4 and 5. The characters certainly don't add much to the story either. Serena, Shauna, Trevor, and Tierno are arguably the biggest downgrade from Generation 5's rivals. Diantha isn't involved nearly as much as any past champion, and we already touched on the gym leaders. I think AZ and Lysander both get the jobs done with their characters injecting some much-needed morals and humanity into the story, but sadly, they're incredibly underutilized. X and Y do a decent job of pushing the series forward through the addition of many new features, but unfortunately it seems that with the workload of fully transitioning the series into the 3D realm, nearly every other area suffered, from the amount of new content to the story to the characters. It all just feels rather incomplete. And now we move on to ORAS, where some things get better. I'm happy to say that the issue of the characters from Generation 3 is heavily alleviated here, with May/Brendan being fleshed out much more, Wally becoming a fully fledged rival with more emphasized development, and with Archie and Maxie actually having discernible character differences between them. We also get the addition of Zinnia, a fantastic new character who completely carries the post-game story. The Delta episode in general is a nice addition considering that the original Ruby and Sapphire had almost no post-game content at all, even if half of it is just flying to places for exposition and the other half was spoiled the week before release by a trailer on YouTube. Thanks, TPCI! Mega Evolution is also tied rather nicely into the main story through Rayquaza. Also, the multiverse officially became a thing in this game, explaining why Mega Evolution was able to occur in this version of Hoenn but not in the original Hoenn. Another neat addition was Primal Reversion. Although it's absurdly broken, it actually explained why Groudon and Kyogre had to return to the Cave of Origin after being awakened from the seafloor chamber. This was a point that was kind of glossed over in the original games, but the remakes actually put some solid reasoning behind it. It's not all sunshine and flowers for ORAS though, as this game does have a considerable amount of things stripped away that were present in the original Ruby and Sapphire. Granite Cave is considerably shortened on the first visit, with the remainder of the cave becoming optional after obtaining the Mach Bike. The Tripmaster's Challenge is shortened by 2 puzzles, New Mauville is shortened and is also locked to the post-game, which also means that you can't obtain TM24 Thunderbolt during the main story now. Desert Tower from Emerald is scrapped, Abandoned Ship is replaced with Sea Mauville, expanding some areas but shortening others, and the puzzles found in Mount Pyre and Sky Pillar are removed completely. The reason why I see this as a big deal is because one of Hoenn's greatest strengths was always in its complex dungeons and room for exploration. Although a few areas are expanded on, like the Scorched Slab and the underwater portions of Hoenn, it seems like the rest of the region's special areas sadly suffered quite a bit. And we haven't even gotten to the true controversy yet, as the Battle Frontier from Emerald was removed and replaced with a blatantly recycled Battle Maison from Kalos, which Nishi Masuda stating that he believed the Battle Frontier would be too challenging for today's generation of kids who are constantly distracted by other games and devices. Which, by the way, yes, these games have overall been made considerably easier than the originals. The problem isn't as glaringly bad as it was in XY, but nonetheless, it still exists. It's a decent remake, I would say, but overall it just doesn't come close to upholding the same standard of quality set by Heart Gold and Soul Silver, since it just leaves out so much content from the original games. Generation 6 did all it could to modernize the Pokemon series with decently good-looking 3D graphics and a slew of new features to keep things fresh, but it came at the cost of nearly everything being mediocre at best. There's enough here to entertain you, but not for long, as the amount of content quickly runs dry thanks to cut corners, easy gameplay, and an overall lack of polish. Generation 6 of Pokemon will be receiving a C-. Well, that's that. I hope we can still be friends. If you enjoyed, then be sure to leave a like on this video. Let me know what your thoughts are on the 6th generation of Pokemon, and be sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. I'll see you guys next time.